It is the night for the 8th, 2025. That means only one thing, that there are very many F1-centric threads, as always, at which we need to pull over the next 50 minutes or less. We'll talk about Maximilian Verstappen being characterised by his peers, a la Alex Albon. So too, Isaac Hadjar, and your boy Cameron is all over the shop. Bear with me 1 second. It's going to get techier than techie things out here, because your boy is lacking as far as his due diligence. Here we go. Let's do one of these. Should we go again? Shall we go again? And your boy can edit it out. It is the night for the 8th, 2025, meaning therefore there are multitudinous threads at which we need to pull. Turtle Dove, James, it's going to get techie. Issa, as always, it will be Maximilian Verstappen being characterised by his brethren, his colleagues, his right honourable peers in Alex Albon, Hadjar, so too Gabby Bortoletto, in a documentary that's now being screened on YouTube, Oracle Red Bull Racing. So too we'll talk about Max Verstappen to George Russell, the story that will never die, because George Russell keeps on injecting life into it. We'll talk about Lewis Hamilton and engineers. Manish Pandey, executive producer of the Senna documentary, the goatiest F1 pick ever pulled together. Hey, let's hear what he has to say about Sir Lewis Hamilton at the Hungarian Grand Prix. Engineers apparently none too happy, not with Lewis now, with the idea of signing Lewis Hamilton in the first place. Oh, the humanity. So too we'll talk about Carlos Sainz, talking about his difficulty adapting to Williams and why that might be, possibly. And then the final instance is your main event. We'll talk about Hemlut, Marko saying that OJP is good, but he's not as good as Maximilian Verstappen. And again, it feels like he's responding to friend of the channel, Peter D. Windsor, who said not too long ago that Oscar Piastri is so good that in equal-ish machinery that Maximilian Verstappen might struggle ever so slightly. We'll go through all of that gubbins over the next 48 minutes or less. For why? Because it's the Saturday show. That's why, meaning therefore we've got to talk about some F1, and this has to be a conversation. Michael, you're a legend. It's going to get techie, I'm telling you. What's going on? Shogun, Nando up in there, Benzi too, F1 boy, Sander, let's go. Let us go. Should we talk in the first instance about Maximilian Verstappen and what Alex Albon and Isaac Hadjar and Gabriel Bortoletto had to say about him? Max, says Alex Albon, quote, is probably the most misunderstood driver on the grid. His words, not mine. Hadjar had this to say: if I ever need any requests or any advice, Max is here and he's very open. Oh, the humanity. Gabby Bortoletto said the following, quote, maybe he doesn't show this to the camera so people don't see how great of a person he is, how good of a heart he has for young people, and how much he's willing to help. What is going on here, chat? Genuinely, what is going on? And again, that's good to read, but when I see Sir Lewis Hamilton going in and doing the mentoring thing with Antonelli, also very, very heartwarming to see. But what happened to F1 fire-breathing dragons? What happened to 88, 89, Senna and Alain Prost, Le Professeur, trying to kill each other quite literally? Whatever happened to that, chat? I miss that sort of F1. Yeah, it's nice that these guys, Max and Lewis Hamilton, taking these elder statesman roles. Do you know what I mean? Bringing the new young hungry rookies, that generation, under their wing and showing them what to do and what not to do. Yeah, I like that. But whatever happened to competition, I feel like that's what this season is lacking. Can I moan for a second? Indulge me going scorched earth. I tried to justify to a mate the other day when we were talking about Formula 1 why he should continue to watch 2025. And the conversation went something like this. If Oscar Piastri and Lando continue to fight it out for the Drivers' Championship in 2025, it could get techier than techie things. It could. It could be 1989 and 1990 all over again, Alain Prost. It could get elbows out. These guys could. They might roll up the sleeve. And if it does get like that, 2025 could be one of the best seasons that we've seen in Formula 1 in recent history. My friend's response to me, do you know what it was? If my auntie had a phallic tool, she would be my uncle. There are too many ifs, buts and maybes in all of your stanza and subordinate clauses, Cameron. And you know what, chap? I've got to take two seats. I think he's right. There are too many ifs and buts with 14 races in now, and there hasn't been fireworks. Maximilian Verstappen held the feet of Oscar and Lando to the F1 flame for a couple of races back there. Mention no name Suzuka, mention no names the British Grand Prix, Saudi Arabia, Imola too. But you can only outperform and be the difference for so long, can't you? Now all of a sudden it feels like monotony settings. Is it 2025 or are we in 2000 to 2004 or is it 2014 to 2020? Monotony settings. I know as a grizzled F1 vet, an old grey bearded one, I understand that these things move in cycles and it can't be gangbusters 2021 every single season or a 1990 or a 1989. I get it. I understand it, but yet and still, sometimes Lando, no Riz, and Oscar, Jack, Piastri, sometimes you got to get your elbows out. Yeah, it's fine. UNICEF settings and altruism and sports etiquette, I get it. But sometimes, man, it's got to be a bit, get techie. Do you know what I mean? Do you really want to be a world drivers champion? Sometimes the whats supersede in terms of importance the hows and the whys. Sometimes you got to have sports etiquette fade to black. Do you know what I mean? Just like Michael did in 94 and 97. If indeed, of course, you want to win yourself a championship of the drivers variety. Or maybe that's just me, chat. Maybe that's just me. And the skullduggerous streak that runs quite pertinently through my veins and my bones. But I digress. Because Maximilian Verstappen, again, another topic of conversation, because King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, has been talking about him and the contract negotiations that will so influence his future with the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. Here's what he's had to say. The fact is that most teams are taking, quote, talking with most drivers to worry about their future. It's just the short term. It's not just the short term future of next year. There's conversations, contractual ones, already ongoing for drivers in 2027, 2028 and 2029. We're not talking about contracts for 2026 anymore. Everybody's looking forward. Ergo, the conversations between Mercedes and Max weren't just about 2026. Of course, they were about 2027, because then the purveyors of the competitive landscape will know for a fact in 2026 which one of the 10 teams on the grid has the durable competitive advantage for the next rule and reg spec. Lest we forget, brand new, both aero and power units, 50% electric, 50% ICE. It will get techier even than techie things. Adrian Newey settings, maybe it will be Aston Martin. Maybe the word on the F1 curb is correct and Mercedes will have the whip hand. Nobody knows is the honest truth. But we will do in less than 12 months' time. And that's when you want to make your move. That's why Maximilian Verstappen is stasis until then. George Russell continues. I know this is Toto, the boy who cried wolf now. I think Russell triggered the whole media avalanche. Behave yourself, Toto. You were talking about this more than George, trying to be open and honest and transparent. I'd be doing my shareholders a disservice if I didn't do my damnedest to sign the next generational talent on the grid in a fire-breathing Maximilian Verstappen. This was your words, Toto, the boy who cried wolf, not George's. How very dare you? I've said to him, listen, I have the obligation. There we go. This is Toto. Go on, I'm going to read this out whole because it's important now. Toto talking about George Russell triggered this avalanche. Behave yourself, Toto. Toto, the boy who cried wolf, says the following, and I quote, I think Russell triggered the whole media avalanche. I'm sometimes maybe naive, but I try to be transparent with the drivers. Try being the operative word, Toto. I said to him, listen, I have the obligation of exploring what Max is doing in the next few years. Can you imagine? You imagine a conversation. Can you imagine the look that George will have been giving Toto? Excuse me, George, can I have a chat, mate? Listen, I think you're the guy. I think you're the next one. You're going to bring us back to the mountaintop. We're going to win all our silverware over the next few years at the altar of George Russell. We're looking to prioritise you. And of course, Kimi, we're happy with our current lineup. However, with that being said, King George Russell of Kings Lynn, Norfolk, I'm going to go and explore. Listen, I've got to have the chat with Max at least. Oh, the humanity. Rage settings. What do you mean, Toto? The flagrant disrespect. Thou shalt put some respect on George Russell's name. Toto continues. Again, gaslighting ever so slightly. Can you spell that? Here's what Toto says. I said to him, I have the obligation of exploring with Max what he's going to do for the next few years. I think he came out with it wanting to show I'm aware of what's going on. There's nothing happening behind my back and I'm fine with that. Bloody Nora. I mean, I think friend of the channel Peter D. Windsor is right, being honest, that when George comes to the negotiating table again, he's going to want the flexibility, but he should want whatever fee he asks for before, rumoured to be $30 million times 3 or 4 because of the flagrant disrespect at the hands of Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Thou shalt put some respect on his name. How very dare you, Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Toto is a boss. He can do whatever he wants. He's more than a boss. He's a bloody shareholder is the issue, Nando. Do you know what I mean? He almost signs his own checks, calling Cameron on his ball feathers. 11 teams in 2026. This is true. Freudian slip. F1, but of course, because Cadillac F1 are an 11th entrant. Are they? Are they an 11th entrant, really? When they're meant to come in on a blaze of glory, become an engine manufacturer. That's not going to happen to 2028 now. Is this techie? Or are they just a rubber stamp? Is this not corporate peacocking, performative? In fact, well, I digress. That's so not right. That's so not right, George. It's not right the way that they've been treating. Noir, you're an absolute legend. Greetings, love your passion. Commentator of the commentary of the year. Behave yourself, Toto. Noir, I think it's rude, you know. I think you're very kind. You're, Noir, as kind as Toto the boy who cried wolf is rude and disrespectful. I don't think it's acceptable the way that they're treating it. And I don't think it's acceptable the way that Toto is gaslighting King George whilst they're still so soon to the circumstance that was get me Maximilian Verstappen for champion. Oh, and by the way, let me talk about Lewis Hamilton before we talk about Carlos Sainz. Let's talk about Carlos Sainz first. Because this feels like for Carlos and Lewis, this is the season of acclimatization, right? Sainz, I predicted that Sainz was going to come and blaze, like destroy Alex Albon, that Alex Albon shouldn't get a whiff of Carlos Sainz Jr. because of the driver that he is. Now, listen, does Carlos Sainz have a cheeky mistake, an error of the unforced variety in his luck? Oh, you bet your bottom dollar he has. Mr. Happiness, trigger happy on the throttle, and he always drives the car as if this is his first time in a rear-wheel drive car. See a car going like this, stepping out, oversteer instance, and you'd be forgiven for predicting that was Charles Leclerc. There's the Freudian slip. That was Carlos Sainz in the car, because he does have that mistake in his locker. But is he a brilliant driver? Absolutely. Technical feedback, god tier levels of absolutely. You've heard of the Carlos Sainz effect, that when he comes to a team, they're here, and then when he leaves the team, they are here. He improves them always by dint of his industry and the level, the granularity and texture of his technical feedback, his ability to translate these driver messages into a way that the engineers can interpret usefully and meaningfully. That's the Carlos Sainz effect. And again, don't believe me. Do your own research and you'll see. Every time he joins, the team's here, and then when he leaves, the team's here. Same thing happened with Toro Rosso back in the day. When he left, they were here. Same thing happened with Ferrari too. When he left, they were here. Same thing at McLaren. When he left, they were here. He improves teams. But then sometimes you got to look at his performance, right? Love me a bit of Carlos Sainz, just as I do some Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton. But he has been atrocious this year in that Williams. Alex Albon has buried him where he stands. What are we doing? This is insane. Even accounting for or normalising for even this acclimatisation process. Carlos Sainz has not been Carlos Sainz this year. He doesn't look anywhere near the man that nearly beat Charles Leclerc 2-1 in the first 3 seasons that they spent alongside each other. Nowhere near. But here's what he's had to say in defending himself, Exhibit A, B and C. Here's what he says, quote, engine braking, That's the difference. That's what I'm needing to acclimatise for and get used to. He says, can I draw it and explain it to you in a computer? Because here, just speaking about it, obviously, I'm not going to go into detail, but it's completely different Ferrari as versus what I'm driving now in the Williams. He continues, the way you use the gears, engine braking, the downshift, and how it goes into the engine braking, the transition from the brake migration to the engine braking is different. You have to change your driving style for sure. For me, continues Carlos Sainz Jr., that even if I'm taking the time to adapt to the team and the car, I don't think I took my time to adapt to the car. I think I was quite quick straight away. Behave yourself, Carlos. What's he talking? I didn't realise Carlos Sainz was an habit of a reason. You're getting smoked. I love you, Carlos. Like, man from Madrid, do you know what I mean? Technical feedback, like proper underdog. Do you know what I mean? I'll never forget when in Netflix when Carlos Sainz Jr.'s cousin said, who has cojones like Carlos Sainz Jr. when he came back after appendicitis surgery and nailed himself an Australian Grand Prix. Concur, sir. He's God tier. But what are we talking about here? What, that you've acclimatized well, Carlos? If the way that you're getting whipped by Alex Albon is acclimatizing well, then I wouldn't like to see what acclimatizing poorly is. For me, it's important that when I'm taking my time to adapt to the team in the car, I don't think I took too much time to adapt to the car. I think I was quite quick straight away. It's just getting results and putting things together that have been a struggle since the beginning of the year. He continues still in race 12. It doesn't, well, race 14 now, or 15. It doesn't seem like we're getting any better at Where was he talking about, chat? Well, I hate it. Just like I've got to go hard and criticise Sir Lewis for one of the... In fact, I can't even say it to Sir Lewis because he's done one of these. Mea culpa. It's not the car, it's me. Carlos Sainz is taking a different path here. He's doing one of these with the culpability finger where he should be pointing at himself. He's pointing it at the car and the acclimatization and all of this X, Y, and Z. No, Carlos. Alex Albon is showing you that the car is a good bloody car. It just looks like you're taking your time to learn how to drive it. He continues and he expounds upon my point. At some point it will come. In the meantime, I'll just keep my head down and I'm pretty sure the results are about to come. James Vowles echoes those sentiments, saying that there's a shared frustration as far as Carlos Sainz's results over missed opportunities and inconsistency in Sainz's debut season with the team. Here's where it gets techie. Have you guys heard the chat that Williams might be exploring somebody else to come in there and replace one Carlos Sainz Jr.? There's a couple names that have been bandied around. Mention no names. Checo Perez, Valtteri Bottas. I'm not sure that they can afford... If this continues from Carlos Sainz Jr., notwithstanding that granular God tier level of technical feedback, do not think for a second that James Vowles isn't ruthless enough to full stop new paragraph the tenure of Carlos Sainz as a Williams driver. He will do that, I promise you. You know who Jimmy V is. You understand that he's Toto the boy who cried wolf's mentee. And that's where that ruthlessness will come from. I'm sure early on he was okay. It's just he didn't remain. I don't think he was TWM. I think he was getting destroyed by Alex Albon from the very get-go this season. That's why they're different areas. Daniel, better focus because he's driving himself out of such an offer. Who's going to give a... I understand Peter wins. Listen, maybe he does go back to Ferrari. Maybe if the story that we're about to go through about Lewis and the engineers... Maybe if that holds water and there's truth behind it, maybe Carlos Sainz does end back up at Ferrari, but not, I would argue, before you give Ollie Behrman a proper try in the red car with the yellow badge and the black prancing Corsa top. Oh, the humanity. Carlos Sainz, man from Madrid, talking all that gubbins. Go on then. By the way, Lewis Hamilton is going to get techie here. The context is this. Performance of Lewis hasn't been great thus far this year. The gap between Lewis and Charles in the championship is 42 points. 42, 8 points away from being 2 race wins. We are, ladies and gentlemen, on round 14 of 24. That is chaos. Extrapolate that out. If things continue being this way, 84 points or more potentially. Imagine 75. Let's pro-rata it properly. 70 points will be the difference between Charles Leclerc and Sir Lewis Hamilton. If you told 3 race wins, 3, If you told me that at the start of the season, I would have asked you what you were smoking. So too, the thing for me and Lewis has always been this. If you get him around certain tracks, invincible. As near as makes no difference, undefeatable. But that started to unwind in his tenure towards the end of his stint with Mercedes. We said last year, there is no way on God's green earth, as good as George Russell is, as much as a fire-breathing dragon as he is of an F1 driver, there is no way, even if Lewis Hamilton is driving the car with his eyes closed, there is no way that George is going to beat in qualifying Sir Lewis unless he's sick. Unless it's the bloody pizza game, Michael Jordan settings. There's no way that he'll out qualify him around, I don't know, Australia, let's say, or Monaco, let's say. A weaker track for Sir Lewis. I don't know, Austria potentially, or Las Vegas, whatever you want to go with. But there are 3 tracks around which George has no place. If you're an old grizzled F1 veteran, there are 3 tracks that you don't expect to see the driver in the other car, Lewis Hamilton's teammate, out qualify him on. Those tracks are these: Hungary, Silverstone, so too. I was going to put Suzuka in there. China. Let's go. Right here they are: Montreal, Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, so too Silverstone, so too Hungary. Those are your 3. I could talk about China because he goes well around there, but those are your blockbuster 3. Take those 3 to the bank. If George is out qualifying Lewis around them tracks, then something's going wrong, and that's noteworthy, worthy of a conversation. Last year, if I recall correctly, George out-qualified Lewis around Silverstone and Canada. I never thought I would see the day Houston, therefore, Sir Lewis Hamilton has himself, and we as Sir Lewis Hamilton fans have ourselves a problem. Now, I'm not saying that this is proof positive necessarily of the fact that Lewis is past his prime. Not necessarily, because correlation does not necessarily imply causation, but it's worthy of comment. And again, the conjecture was this: once Lewis Hamilton goes across to Maranello and breathes some fresh air from pastures anew, eats some pasta and drinks himself some Italiano red wine, that all of a sudden things were going to change. You saw him at the start of the season before the Ferrari F40, the yellow badge, the black prancing horse. This means something. This is Lewis Hamilton ticking off bucket list items, aura settings, becoming the main character, remembering who he is. But then you get around Hungary again and it's going to get techier. Hungary is like Lewis Hamilton territory, just like Canada and just like Silverstone. To date, career to date, Lewis Hamilton has 8 wins around the Hungaroring and 9 poles. No one in F1 history has been so prolific around the Hungarian Grand Prix, the Hungaroring. So you would expect, therefore, for Lewis to lock in. The story over the past couple of races between Lewis and Charles Leclerc has been one of convergence, as Lewis Hamilton beds in and gets his feet underneath the red table with a yellow badge and black prancing horse atop. That has been the story, irrespective of the 42 points. You can't just look at outcomes so naively. You've got to look at the underlying, the key drivers and levers. They'll tell you the story, and the gap in qualifying has been doing one of these. But yet and still, at the Hungaroring, Lewis Hamilton's woes were telling, clear blue, and of consequence this time. Because up until this point, season to date, Lewis could have talked about the bloody rear, the suspension, a bit, the car very narrow as far as its operating window, a diva of a car. You can get it to work one of 365 days when it's a full moon around a track that's contoured, high of altitude. That's what we're dealing with here. A W13 of a vehicle, poor pussing settings, because they can't run it as low as they wanted to. When they could, Lewis Hamilton goes and bags a Chinese Grand Prix sprint. It's easy for him when he has the car underneath him. He becomes God tier again. But since then, they've been unable to do that, at risk of excessive plank wear and DNF settings. So up until this time, season to date, Lewis Hamilton said that the car wasn't there. And he was right. He's still right. The car wasn't there, for him. Because Charles Leclerc went and dropped it on pole. And Houston, we have ourselves a problem. At Hungary, Lewis Hamilton's track, just like Canada and just like Silverstone, Houston, we have a problem. This feels like now it's an F1 harbinger of the apocalypse per se, and this is where it gets techier than techie things, because Manish Pandey, executive producer of the Senna film, went on Chris Harrison Cars and had this to say about the circumstance that is Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton. It's a longer clip, but bear with it because it gets techie towards the end when he starts talking about engineers and ex-F1 Ferrari F1 drivers, how they see Sir Lewis Hamilton, and moreover the decision to hire Sir Lewis over a Carlos Sainz Junior. Roll the clip.
It's just desperation. And then, the other half of Ferrari is Lewis not getting into Q3, starting 12th, finishing 12th. I thought he was going to cry. For Lewis Hamilton to turn around and say they need to get another driver. We've got 10 races to go. Some people were predicting a fairy tale this year. Ferrari was a car to beat. They were the strongest car at the end of last season, but it looks like they decided, instead of evolving last year's car, to completely build a new car. My understanding is it's built around a new pushrod front suspension. It meant that 99% of this car is different.
Which, by the way, let me pause for a second and interject Manish Pandey's goated soliloquy, which, by the way, is insane. Why, ladies and gentlemen, permit me to go scorched earth at Scuderia Ferrari before we get onto Sir Lewis and what they're saying over there. Why would Scuderia Ferrari switch up the suspension, their front suspension setting in the final year of a bloody rule and reg set? Why? This is not Fermat's last theorem. This is basics. This is counting. Why would you do such a thing? When you switch up the suspension, we know good and goddamn well that you've got to switch up everything around it, right? You don't build the components of the car in silos. They need to be complementary, lest we be doomed to repeat for the mistakes of Mercedes Christmas past. That's what they did in 2022. And what did that get them then? Why would you build a brand new car when you were 14 points adrift, all told, of McLaren in the constructors last year? Why? This makes no sense. And then you go and build yourself a diva of a car that only works one of 365 days a year when you can run it right next super low to the ground, risking DNF at the altar of excessive planking. This makes no sense. It leaves me frustrated. Please, Manish Pandey, continue.
To the car from last year, and it's gone wrong. And would you put €1 into developing this car now? I mean, I would just be totally flat out now on next year. There's nothing. And the other thing is, Lewis, we saw him standing next to an F40 in a very sharp Italian suit with 7 open windows and an 8th closed. That just looks like some kind of weird, distant graphic artist's wet dream, frankly. It's so sad because the PR for this can't be good. Who wants to buy a baseball cap when you see arguably one of the greatest racing drivers of all time utterly miserable? And just to end this, there's a quote, Arturo Mazzario, who drove for Ferrari in the 70s, and a couple of other sources have now started to do that sort of awful thing that always happens when things go wrong at Ferrari. The press suddenly start to get all these juicy stories. So it turns out that apparently 90% of Ferrari engineers didn't want Lewis. Only John Elkann wanted Lewis. It was only ever commercial. All this guff is coming out. And it must be very hard to be Lewis there at this time, and very hard, frankly, to be Charles, because they've effectively said you can write off the rest of the season. You're not going to win one unless, lightning hits both McLarens, both Mercedes, and possibly one Aston after this race. And, it's a sad state. It's just a very sad state.
No kidding, Sherlock. The piece that jumps off the page at me there is where Manish Pandey says that apparently 90% of Ferrari engineers didn't want for the Sir Lewis Hamilton transfer to go ahead, that they wanted to keep themselves one Carlos Sainz Jr. That, ladies and gentlemen, is telling. It is a pertinent point. You mean to tell me that Lewis Hamilton is going to go over there and win the hearts and minds of a team that didn't want him there in the first place? Who are we kidding, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury? This is chaos. It's never been worse for Sir Lewis, and Manish Pandey makes the point, right, that this now, the thing that Sir Lewis finds himself in, the challenge, the critical challenge over which he will need to come, is this. Now at Ferrari, that the altar that so many previous Ferrari drivers have fell foul of is this self-perpetuating expectation pressure doom cycle. It nailed Sebastian Vettel. It nailed Fernando Alonso too. So too Alain Prost, who told the Ferrari engineers that their car was a dog. This is the pertinent point, right? This is the common theme if we're talking failure of God-tier drivers who go over to Maranello and fail, who come away empty-handed because they've won nothing. You need to do so many things if you're going to nail it at Ferrari. Foster rapport. You've got to shake some hands. You've got to kiss some baby's head. You've got to curry favour. You've got to play the political game. Game of Thrones settings. Either you win or you unalive yourself. That's what we're doing. That's euphemistically speaking, but that's what we're dealing with over here at Ferrari. And it feels like already for Sir Lewis, it's doing one of these. It's much harder to turn that train around than to keep it on track in the first instance, is it not? And therein lies my principal point of concern and contention as far as a 40-year-old Sir Lewis Hamilton driving an SH1T box of an SF25 now being roundly outperformed by a Charles Leclerc. It's going to get techier than techie things. The downfall of the car is quite comical. You know, Issa, I don't think it's a laughing matter, I'll be honest with you. I genuinely don't find it funny at all. It stresses me out to see Lewis talking like that about, no, they need to replace me every time I've been rubbish. I'm useless even. It really, really stresses out my life. Vicariously thinking about what Sir Lewis must be going through. It's techie. Crackosaurus, you're an absolute legend. Gifting memberships as per usual. If you're a brand new member, get yourself over to the community tab and get yourself into the Discord, of course, if you are discourse, modes of F1 discourse. If you are that way inclined, it's going to get techier than techie things over at Ferrari, and it stresses out my life. I'm going to be honest with you. Oh, and by the way, and talk about this for a second, because Piastri over the past couple of weeks has come in for a lot of criticism and a lot of praise equally. We've got to play balanced games, haven't we, as far as OJP? He leads the championship after 14 races in only his third season. Let me give you the compliments first, the praise, Exhibit A, B and C, if you're putting forth Oscar Piastri as one day to go down in the history books as one of the greatest F1 drivers that we've ever seen. This is only his third season. What happened to him last year, his challenge for the championship fell foul at the altar of pace, tyre management and performance in quali, failed to execute at the critical time, but then was only his second season, right? Sophomore settings. Now, however, all of a sudden in his third, he can go toe-to-toe with Lando Norris. Now his stoicism becomes a strength, no longer a weakness. He doesn't look laissez-faire anymore. He went away and did his due diligence. Andrea Stella said, what's happened to Oscar Piastri, he's just gained speed. Nothing more simple or complicated than that. And in doing so, that frees up all these other bandwidth things, strategy. You can become more relaxed. You see Oscar Piastri walking around the paddock with his shoulders pinned back like he owns the place, like he expects even to win the championship in 2025. However, Oscar Piastri's been brilliant. I feel it's unfair to level criticism at him, but we're going to do it because this is a balanced game. Truth, value, objectivity will never sacrifice any one of those at the altar of any cognitive dissonance worthy of the moniker, not partisanship, not recency, nor confirmation bias. So here we go. Here's the criticism of Oscar Piastri, and we will go through Exhibit A, B and C. Australia. How are you following Lando Norris? You can see what he's doing in the wet. And as an F1 driver, notwithstanding the fact that you're only just about to embark on your third season, so therefore you are inexperienced, surely you see what's going on with Lando and you react accordingly. Now's not the time to chase him down. You saw what Max Verstappen did. Give them some breathing space. This is time to exercise some spatial distance, as if you are on the M25 in rush hour. Change up the conditions. Let Lando Norris sacrifice himself. Why then did Oscar Piastri, being so god tier, find himself beached? And he wasn't the first one going round, mind. Beached in the bloody gravel. That's your Exhibit A. Bad mistake from Oscar Jack Piastri. Exhibit B is this. The British Grand Prix. What? Brake check? Why? What? Basics, Oscar Piastri. Love you to death, mate. You're a brilliant driver and you will absolutely win a championship one day. But why do the brake check there? Yeah, I get it. It was techie as far as when the safety car light went off. I understand that. But nevertheless, we're talking about a difference in extents and not kinds. Surely your primary objective in that circumstance isn't to get a penalty and sacrifice 25 points at the altar of a very cheeky error of the unforced variety. Why? What? Exhibit C, Austrian Grand Prix, turn 6, Lando Norris leaves the door wide open. I understand that that's an unconventional place around which to overtake, but nobody's going to tell me, given that Oscar Piastri has made an industry, no, a career out of overtaking in conventional places. Nobody's going to argue that with a straight face, not with tongue in cheek. Lest we forget the Italian Grand Prix chicane 2, lap 1 on Lando Norris, round the outside, 2 trailer park girls go round the outside. Nobody overtakes anyone there, definitely not your teammate Lando Norris, but Oscar Piastri does and did. Mention no names. Baku on Charles Leclerc. Crazy overtake. Forensic level precision from OJP there. Lewis Hamilton in 2025. You saw the overtake that he put round the outside of that dude. So Oscar Piastri is well capable, therefore, of overtaking Lando Norris in turn 6 in Austria. Why didn't he do it? Therefore, these are mistakes, maybe not of material consequence because he's still leading a championship, but they are mistakes, are they not? And again, if you're assessing Oscar Piastri and you're playing balancing games, then you've got to play both sides. There is yin and yang. This isn't me condemning it. Of course, he'll win a championship one day, but the pertinent question is whether this will be the day, this will be the season when he wins the championship, because Peter D. Windsor said the following, didn't he? Friend of the channel, far from me, it would be remiss of me not to defer to Mr. Peter D. Windsor, of course. Legendary settings, length and breadth of expertise on display is chaos each and every single time. However, Peter D. Windsor in our most recent chat said something to this effect, that Oscar is so good that given equal machinery alongside Maximilian Verstappen, that he wouldn't be a walkover. Yes, Max would probably beat him, but it wouldn't be easy. So stoic, so resilient and determined, so forensic in his car placement is OJP. That's Peter D. Windsor's words, not mine. And it feels like Helmut Marko, Dr. Helmut Marko of Red Bull GmbH, has heard those words of Mr. Peter D. Windsor, friend of the channel, goated team manager, world championship team manager, world championship winning, team manager in 1992 with Nigel Mansell. But it feels like Dr. Helmut Marko has disagreed ever so slightly. When talking about Oscar Piastri, he had this to say. Imagine the pressure on him, even if it's techie. This is what Helmut Marko said. Piastri is better than Norris, but he has a long way to go to get to Max. Let's dissect for this. Is Piastri really better than Lando Norris? Well, we'll see by the end of the season. I suppose the pertinent point is this. You're comparing apples and oranges, right? Lando's in his 7th season now, 8th season. Can you imagine an Oscar Piastri in his 7th season now in that car alongside this iteration of Lando Norris? Then we're having ourselves a true conversation. That version of Oscar Piastri would be better than this version of Lando Norris. You can take that one to the bank. However, when Lando's at his Weetabix, around a track like Austria, I don't know, or a track like Hungary, is super difficult to beat. And Oscar Piastri is going to find that out, I think, between now and the end of the season, if he hasn't done already. Dr. Helmut Marko continues. in this final, we can learn how to put the tyres. So again, the conversation has been this as far as McLaren, and Max Verstappen said similar recently, didn't he? The reason why McLaren are so fast is not just because their car is quick, it's because of the way the car interacts with the tyres. Lest we forget that the rubber as it meets the road is always going to be the most important portion of the car. Tyre deg is the battleground upon which the 2025 season will be won or lost, and there is a team that handles deg better, minimises and mitigates for deg better than any others, particularly in the most frequently occurring climatic circumstance on the grid in 2025. That team has a name, and that team's name is McLaren. It's double brake duct settings. It's an ambitious suspension geometry as far as the anti-dive and anti-squat. That's what we're talking about there. That's why when we get around the warm tracks, all of a sudden, you might get away in the first instance early on first stint, but towards the end of each and every single one of those stints, McLaren is gapping every other single team on the grid at the altar of reduced tyre degradation. That's what we're talking about here. Helmut Marko says the following: in the final, we can learn how to put the tyres in the right operating window, and Mercedes and Ferrari are also experiencing ups and downs in this regard. These are always speculations. He's an excellent technical. Okay, so when asked about Rob Marshall and his input into McLaren, missed the last front wing bender and rear wing bender. This is what Dr. Helmut Marko had to say. Envious all the while that they didn't poach him as Oracle Red Bull Racing. That it's just speculation that Rob Marshall is the driver of all of that success, but he's an excellent technician and he certainly played an important role. But success is the result of teamwork, says Helmut Marko. No kidding, Sherlock. Mention no names. Christian Horner Racing, no longer Oracle Red Bull Racing. That feels and reads like a subtle dig at the former Red Bull Racing team principal. But he continues, when asked about Oscar and Lando, he does like Christian Horner did many moons ago on Netflix's Drive to Survive. Then Horner said, when asked which of those McLaren drivers which one of them do you think is the best? His answer was one word: Christian Horner's. Piastri. Simple and plain. Didn't even flutter an eyelid. It was instant, fastest finger first settings. Helmut Marko, though, is playing the same cards. He says Piastri to quote, Piastri has the guts, is more consistent and always brings out the best in himself. Norris will be even faster on the dry lap, but overall I can see Piastri in front. Oscar, he continues, has had an incredible career and is improving year after year, but Verstappen is Verstappen. So we're comparing and contrasting. Listen, let me tell you this. If there is a driver on the grid in equal machinery, if there exists one in 2025 that could take it to Max Verstappen in equal-ish machinery over the course of 24 races, I would argue, and this is controversial, that he has a name, and his name is Oscar Piastri. It is, however, a big if. What I can't erode for is Max being the difference maker over the course of 2025 and 2024, lest we forget Brazil as an example, Imola as a bloody example 24, lest we forget Saudi Arabia this year, blah, blah, blah. I can't unwind for those. Saw them in real time, and he shouldn't be able to do that. Imola as well this year, you shouldn't be able to do that. So the comparisons are complementary to Oscar Piastri. That we're even having this conversation should put a big smile on Oscar Piastri's face. But is he there yet? I concur with Mr. Helmut Marko, Dr. Helmut Marko. He continues, Verstappen is Verstappen. The two aren't worth comparing. He still has a long way to go to get to Max Verstappen, but he has the potential to become one day a great pilot. What are we doing here? It sounds like Cam Marko. James is a literal killer. Oscar Jack is figurative. Oh, science senior can't automatically translate to his kid Piquet. Jehovah's, it doesn't work like that, does it? It does. I don't think it works like that. Michael Jordan is another brilliant example. I had two scrub children that were never going to live up to his glory and or greatness. It's techie. I can't wait for the next couple of... When are we back? This time next month, right? So we've got a few weeks to go, and there will be news, there will be speculation. By the way, have you guys seen, for those of you who are invested in a bit of esports, did you see Jarno Opmeer? Silverstone came into pit. We'll go through the tape tomorrow. I saw it over the course of the day. Came into pit from third at Silverstone and crossed the line first. Chaos. Tax avoidance settings as far as his very unique brand of F1 esports, sporting endeavour par excellence. God tier racing move, but ultimately they decided that they weren't gonna allow it for him to keep for it. We'll go through it tomorrow. Gary, they raced in Hungary. Oscar just couldn't pass. Here's what it is, Michael. We'll talk about Hungary since we're talking about Hungary. I said this to Peter the other day, didn't I? Mr. Wins, a legend. A clean one stop a clean air one stop will always be quicker than a dirty air two stop. Now, a clean air two stop will be quicker than a clean air one stop. That much is clear. But Lando Norris around Hungary, he was on a clean air one stop, and track position is key. Lest we forget, Murray Walker told us this, that catching is one thing and passing is another. Therefore, clean air, Oscar Piastri. Your words, not mine. Clean air is king, especially around Hungary. Monaco, Sons, Wars. So what did we think was going to happen, really? That Oscar Piastri was going to put moves on Lando around Hungary? Behave yourself. No chance. Even Oscar Piastri said that he would have needed a fresh set of soft compound red labelled tyres. No. To make that overtake happen. The delta, the quantum necessary to overtake Hungary was more than anything that Oscar Piastri had in his locker. It's techie. If you went to college, you should know these things. Eddie, you're cracking me up, mate. Very charismatic. Eddie, do you know what I mean? He'll carry it, aka charismatic. Right, your boy's going to go and get some grub. You guys have been legends as always. I appreciate each and every single one of you for indulging me in my B-spec level of F1 monologue and soliloquy. Listen, for elated members, get yourself over to the community tab, get yourself in the Discord. We're going to do, for all of you who are members, we're going to do a cheeky chat tomorrow at some point. I promise you, the first of many, hopefully, but I want to start putting on another different proposition for those of you who support the channel and deserve as much. You guys have been legends. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday between now and next time. As always, the prosecution rests no further questions. Your Honour.